So, hello everybody. Welcome to another Capstone chat. And this time we have Alex Lemley with us. And Alex is a Shepherd 2010 grad. She was Comm grad, obviously, but she also was a journalism minor. And we're not going to say that it was print journalism because that ages her. Haha, I did it.
That doesn't exist anymore.
It doesn't exist anymore. But anyway, she has worked at Politico as a business development manager and at the Washington Post as a senior client services manager. But she's currently at USA Today Network, where she's a manager in content solutions. And we were just mentioning, it's kind of a little bit of a full circle because she actually did her internship at USA Today as well when she was at Shepherd. So Alex, welcome to class and go on. Oh, and by the way, everybody, we're gonna do the same thing as we always do. We're gonna get the chat window open, and if you have a question that you'd like to ask, just say, I have a question, and we'll go through that so there's not all those awkward pregnant pauses. Oh, speaking of pregnant pauses, Alex is actually on maternity leave right now. Her baby is just under a month. So we're really fortunate that she's taking the time to be with us. So there you go.
Cool. Well, definitely. Thank you so much, Monica. I'm super, super excited to be here. I want this to be as conversational as possible. So, feel free if unmuting and speaking up is not your thing and you want to be in the chat, do that. But if you also want to mute and have a conversation here in real time, let's do that as well. I'm going to kind of just give a quick rundown of what I did at Shepherd. What I found at Shepherd that helped me in my career, any tips I may have in terms of that scary post-grad life, because I can tell you it was terrifying for me. And then any other questions you guys might have. But I also just want to say you guys are so, so lucky. Monica was hands down my favorite professor, and I know everybody always says that, but it just bears repeating. She's the best, so I'm very excited to be here and speak with you guys. So, okay, so as Monica mentioned, my name's Alex Lemley. Born and raised West Virginia, and I grew up in Huntington, and went to Shepherd fall of 2006, which I think a lot of you were maybe in elementary school. But anyways, and always knew I wanted to be a comm major. I was editor of my school yearbook and newspaper and just loved to write, but didn't know how to formulate that into a career. So I hoped that the comm major would help me along in that regard. As Monica mentioned, I was also a journalism minor. I was the sports editor for the Picket, which was really a fantastic time. I loved writing for them. And around 2008, I was told by the Dean of Journalism, Dr. Lewin, I don't know if he's there anymore, that journalism was dying and to find a new job. And this was during the 2008 recession. So things were just really scary at the time. And I was like, I don't know, I thought everything was black and white. I thought, oh, my degree's gonna be in journalism, so I have to be a journalist. And I didn't know how to apply that. Right around the time that Dr. Lewin mentioned that to me, I was also in AST, and I was the alumni liaison there. We had an alumni reach out, and her name was Penny Ford, and she worked at USA Today. And she's like, hey, I'm looking for college kids to apply for this internship. So I applied and built a really great relationship actually with her. I highly recommend connecting with alumni whenever you meet them. And we still chat today. But anyways, I got the internship, and two things happened in a 6-month period. I got that internship, and I was feeling lost, like I mentioned, and I actually took Monica's graphic novel course. Monica, do you still teach that?
I do.
Yeah, so I took this really off the beaten path for me course that I was scared of, intimidated by. I was just a writer. And between that and the internship, I did two things so far outside of my comfort zone that I realized there was a whole other world of communications I hadn't thought of, and that was business communication. Where I got to use software and programs in the graphic novel course while still being creative. And then I also was in this advertising internship at USA Today that showed me the business side of communications, where we learned business plans and we learned, about revenue and things like that. And I just had never thought about that stuff because I was bad at math. So I thought I don't need to do business. But anyways, long story short, I'm telling you all of this because these were all things I was terrified of and all things that I didn't think I was interested in. And that's my biggest advice I've given anyone, from my nieces to my younger siblings, is that I think it's a bit trite, but do something that scares you. The graphic novel course scared me. I'd never used Photoshop. I had never taken my own photography. I was just a pen and paper kind of gal. And then after graduation, I used my resources from the USA Today internship that I had to get a job at Politico. And Politico, again, was an advertising job. And, I think a lot of times people think you have to have parents, this is again my personal experience, parents who come from money, or like you have to be super well connected. But every connection I ever made was made by myself. It was, I either interned or worked or asked or volunteered or just followed up with people who I was like, they may not remember me, but I'm going to shoot my shot. And it continued to snowball into roles at the Washington Post, where again, Monica, I don't know if she was ever in your classes, but I got the job at the Washington Post from a Shepherd alumni named Rachel Benedict. And then, went back to USA Today for an internship while I was at Shepherd. So it definitely all started with me being scared, being uncomfortable, and doing something I never thought I would do. So I'm going to take an initial pause. That's kind of an info dump, and see if you guys have any specific questions about any roles I've done, paths, scenarios you guys have experienced and you don't know what to do. But that's my general info dump.
What's an average day for you like, Alex? What do you do?
Yeah, so honestly, it's a lot of FaceTime with people. And I don't mean FaceTime the app, I mean like FaceTime with clients. So I've worked with so like I said, all my titles that Monica mentioned are fancy titles for essentially I work in advertising. When a brand wants to advertise with a publisher, and publisher means Politico, the Washington Post, or USA Today, they reach out to me or their advertising agency that's representing them, and we work on a contract together. So they tell me what their budget is. I try and upsell them because you always want more money. And we work together in putting an ad campaign together and what our ad products are, be that a homepage takeover, or are we going to put together a really cool, documentary video that they're going to sponsor and pay for. It's going to run on our site, things like that. So we work on the contracts together, and then I work on the logistics after we've won that contract. So after we've decided, what they're going to pay, I work on the logistics with the video production team. I work with our graphic designers to ensure that the infographic is going to look like what the brand wants. I work with the client to ensure what we're creating matches up to their standards, things like that. And then internally, I work with a lot of people. There's a lot of hands involved, as I mentioned, the graphic designers, the social media coordinators will be tweeting about it, we'll be posting about it on Instagram. So yeah, it's a lot of talking to people and babysitting essentially, but it's an art form because people have personalities and people have temperaments, and especially with brands like your Coca-Colas and your Goldman Sachs, things can get, a lot of money can get thrown around and people get very testy because of that. So it's all about relations and ensuring that everybody internally and externally are happy. It looks like Rhonda has a question.
Yeah, I was just curious, have a bunch of the sort of recent, I guess, very heated political events and debates affected how your job goes, like with getting advertising for articles that might be about very non-advertising friendly things?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So actually, you can Google it after this call, or I can try and find a link. So USA Today owns over 200 other local properties, including the Indianapolis Star, the Tennessean, and just all over the country. And so I also work on those papers as well as USA Today. And we actually had, I only work in digital, but my print equivalent actually had a anti-Muslim, I don't know if they're a super PAC, but like a PAC, whatever, a PAC, reach out, paid for, and ran a anti-Muslim insert in Tennessean, and did not go through the appropriate channels to get it approved. I actually work directly, talking about all those hands involved, those cooks in the kitchen. I work every single day with our legal team for stuff like that. I put together documents for what we call our flagged industries to highlight that need to go under special review. And especially since the Black Lives Matter movement, myself and my boss have put forth paperwork to our legal team where we want to have a moral code as well for these flagged industries. So we definitely keep those in mind. It's a great question. It's an ever evolving thing. It's kind of a gut check thing, unfortunately. There's no black and white to it. But it's definitely been, before I went on maternity leave last month, an ever constant thing. And not just with Black Lives Matter, with COVID. When I was at the Washington Post, I actually worked with an ad agency who was representing the Trump campaign. And I had to go through a lot of legal stuff with that. And there's also kind of a personal thing, you know, what works for you in your business. And so we definitely keep that in mind. As I mentioned, it's an ever evolving situation, but it has affected us a lot in the last 6 months for sure. And it looks like Annabelle has a question.
Yeah, I was wondering, you mentioned like, you know, you had to have a lot of FaceTime with people. And I was wondering, what to you has been the most useful, like what method of communication is like the primo method that you really need to learn how to use? Like, is it talking to people face to face? Is it writing emails, or what do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question as well, actually. So if you're not from West Virginia, I apologize, but I always tell people that my strength is I am from West Virginia, and that my mom always said not to, what was it? You don't attract bees with vinegar, you attract them with honey. So even when I've had people who I've been so angry that I go back into the bathroom and I get in the bathroom stall and I cry, because when I'm really angry, I cry. And they've made me that angry. But what I do is that I just take a breath, I center myself, and I'm also very big on work-life balance. And so I think that when I come back out there, I don't counter them with their anger or their hatefulness or their hostility. And I just always speak calmly, and I always speak rationally. And I always think, you know, this is work. We're not curing cancer here. It is not the end of the day thing. It's not the end all be all. Like, we don't need to be screaming at each other. And so, you know, with really difficult personalities, I think that's been my strength, is that I can always keep a cool head in a big meeting. I can keep a cool head when a presentation doesn't go according to plan, or if we don't win that contract. So I think that it is hard, and it's a learned trait. I wasn't always like this. But to keep your personal emotions at the door when you're having these presentations is huge. I'm still experiencing to this day people who let their personal emotions go through. I'm like, you're 45 years old and you've been in this for 20 years. How are you not keeping some kind of decorum during this conversation? And people remember that, to be honest. I mean, you want it to be some cool business school strategy, but it comes down to, in my opinion, humanity and person-to-person interaction and respect, to be perfectly frank.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then Haley's got a question.
Yes, first of all, congratulations. A new baby's really exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I also wanted to know, because I know you're in this field where clearly there are a bunch of like different political opinions being thrown around constantly, and it's like right in the middle there. How do you set aside like personal beliefs and kind of go about this in a professional manner? Like, do you have advice for that type of like mindset shift?
Yeah, it's hard because I am very politically active, and I'm very politically passionate. You know, I think one thing was actually my background in journalism at Shepherd, where when we were writing, we were always told to keep an unbiased opinion. And what, you know, for instance, I have a friend who's still at the Washington Post, and she was working on an advertising campaign. Again, you can Google this as well. It made news in like Ad Age and Ad Week. She was the liaison for the Washington Post for this Trump homepage takeover that took, when did it run? It was the day after some big news story broke. And all these people gave the Washington Post crap. Like, how could you run this Trump campaign? Like, Trump's the devil, all this stuff. But they're still journalists, and they still have to report, and they still can't show bias. So that's what I always remind myself. Even though I'm not a journalist, I can't show bias, because even though I believe in this one thing, it doesn't mean it's right. You know, there's obviously some things like, I mean, murder and rape and things that are black and white, but I have to remind myself that politics is not black and white. I am not always right. I can always learn from someone else. But then again, like I said earlier to how I work with our legal team, there's ever evolving stuff. And I do believe in the moral code that we are putting forth for my organization right now. So yeah, so there's some times where you do have to do a gut check and speak up, but for the most part, I try to remind myself that even though I'm not a journalist, I'm supporting journalists and I have to align myself with their ethics and their unbiased. So I hope that answers it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then Serafina, it's a beautiful name.
Thank you. Hi. I was just curious, where are you located out of and how did you get to where you are?
Where am I located? Yeah, I'm in DC. Gosh, how did I get to where I am? So like I said, I was born and raised in West Virginia. I spent a few months after graduation living in an unfinished basement in Shepherdstown because I didn't know where I wanted to go after graduation. So let me tell you guys, it is not a linear thing. You will ping pong all over the place. And I actually don't know if you guys see it on German Street, but there's a little PR company above Betty's called Platinum PR. I worked there for 6 months. Highly recommend if you haven't, reaching out to Sandy Spinagle. She is a huge champion and advocate for Shepherd grads and helping with the community and networking.
She's in
What's that?
She's in Frederick now.
Is she? Oh,
she moved.
Well, still look her up and reach out to her because she is a huge advocate for recent grads. She went to Shepherd as well. She's still highly involved in the alumni community, so she's fantastic. But worked there, interned there for a few months, got a job in Baltimore working at an insurance company for another 6 months, just because I wanted to like go out and see the world, and I never lived outside of West Virginia, although there's nothing wrong with it. It's still the best place ever. And then when I was in Baltimore, I got the job at Politico and moved to DC, and I've been here since 2012. And I love it here. Definitely still heart in West Virginia though. I was sharing with Monica, I already got a mountain made onesie for my daughter because I want to raise her half West Virginia and she'll know where she's from. Yeah, I guess that's how I got here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you guys are ever in the city, I'm always happy to grab coffee or drinks because now I can have wine. So always, I'll have Monica send out my contact information, and I'm always happy to connect.
All right, I actually have a question. What kind of software do you use in tracking ads? And, and what is in your job, do you provide feedback on, the success of ads? Do you provide that service to clients?
Yeah. So every publisher I've been with, we have used different software, which to me, I was like, oh my goodness, I've only ever used this one. So when I was at my USA Today internship, I used a software, I don't know if it's a software, but a service called Salesforce, which is a huge company, wildly popular with businesses across the globe. And they're actually always hiring. So I always recommend looking, and they have offices all over the world, so always recommend looking at them. But so I did Salesforce USA Today for my internship. I was interviewing at Politico. They're like, oh, you have Salesforce experience, great, come on in. Came to Politico, and then they threw 5 other softwares at me that I'd never heard of before, and I was like, holy crap, imposter syndrome, they're gonna fire me, what have you. But after I've gone to publisher to publisher to publisher, I have learned no one knows what's going on. We're all faking it till we make it. It's learning while you're in the field. And if you were just not embarrassed, and never be embarrassed, to ask questions up front, like, I don't get this, I don't understand this, that's the time to ask, not a year down the line when you've been doing reports that you weren't doing correctly, which I've seen people do. But anyway, so I'd say Salesforce, another service called Operative, is how I would build contracts out for advertising campaigns. We've also used a big one, and I know Google does trainings on it for free, or they did as of 2019. Dart Sales Manager, also known as DSM, is a big one. That's how I use that at Politico and at the Washington Post. And then currently at USA Today, operative is my biggest one for sure. But I didn't really pay attention to Microsoft Office in college. Again, I thought I was a writer, so I just needed to know how to use Word. Drown yourself in Excel, immerse yourself. Excel is the most helpful tool on the planet. And if you're an Excel wizard, I don't care what job or what field you're going into, you're going to impress people. So I'd say Excel is a huge one for me that I had to learn on the job, but I wish I had better background experience beforehand. Because it's not just numbers with Excel, it's organization, it's planning, like it can do so much. It's wild. Yeah. Any questions on the softwares and what have you? And Rudolph has a question.
God, I like you.
I have to unmute myself. I'm sorry. Yeah. So I guess I just wanted to know, like, you kind of spoke on it, but maybe you could touch on it a little more about, like, what exactly was the most valuable or useful thing that you found in your comm studies, or just your overall college experience?
Yeah, definitely. I loved my time at Shepherd, like, so much. Like, I am so nostalgic. I married a guy from Shepherd. My 3 best friends to this day that I talk to every single day are from Shepherd. Shepherd got me into where I am in my career. Like, it was just a fantastic experience. One of the things is take advantage of how small Shepherd is. I know people complain, oh, Shepherd's so small, everybody knows everybody. That's the beauty of it. I have friends now, when I talk about Monica, they're like, wait, first of all, you're Facebook friends with your college professor and you call her by her first name. And I'm like, yeah, don't you? And they're like, no, I went to Ohio State. Like, I don't even know my college professor's name. And you know, like I said, with Sandy Spinagle, I connected with her because she came to a class and spoke, and you know, I got an internship with her, and my USA Today internship was with a Shepherd grad. Because the community is so small, when we find each other out in the wild, we're so excited to find each other, and we want to help and lift and encourage each other. Many of my friends who went to Shepherd, I've gotten them jobs and vice versa. It's definitely a family. So I think the biggest thing I got, and like I said, I grew up in Huntington where Marshall University is, and my house that I grew up in was closer to Marshall's campus than my own high school. And I could have gone to Marshall, which is umpteenth times is larger than Shepherd. I could have gone to WVU. I applied to Ohio State and Kentucky, but when I saw how small the courses were and saw the people, I remember we would go to Tony. I don't think Tony's is there anymore, but like, no. we would go to Tony's and have beer in the backyard with Jason for a class. And I don't know if Jason's still there, but like, that didn't happen. You didn't build those relationships at Ohio State. You didn't build those at Kentucky. They didn't understand your background and who you were as a person, understand your passion into your career. So definitely take advantage of that, you know, reach out and make those connections, even if it's outside of your circle. And that was my biggest thing, was the courses were such small courses, the relationships we built, and the real-time experience. I don't even know if Monica remembers this, but there was an issue with my capstone my senior year, and Monica helped me out personally with the capstone. Well, she didn't help with my capstone, but she helped me out on a personal matter during the capstone time. And you know, that just it was a learning lesson for me, and she taught me some lessons professionally to apply in the future in those scenarios that you just don't get at big schools. So I definitely say take advantage of that.
That's huge. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I have a question. I have loads of questions if they're all being quiet today. If there is one thing, I know you said that you wish you'd spent more time diving in Excel, swimming in the Excel pool.
Yeah.
Are there other skills that you wished that you had that you when you left?
Absolutely. I actually had regretted not saying it, so I'm glad you brought it up. Photoshop, actually. I don't live in Photoshop by any means in my current role. but it has been, there's like little scenarios where it could have really helped turn around a project faster if someone was a wizard in Photoshop instead of us having to outsource or go find a graphic design firm, what have you, across the board, just time and time again, like, damn, I really wish I understood Photoshop. Like a lot of the comm kids did know. Again, I siloed myself for the first 2 years of my academic career at Shepherd, thinking I'm a writer, I don't need to know that. It's so helpful in times you don't even think it will be. It just, it rules the world, that I say dive in and become a Photoshop wizard. And there's so many courses online that you could learn, that speak to your specific interests. If you want to do infographic, I don't know, whatever, just Photoshop. That's what I wish I had dove into more. Oh, and Rudolph has another question.
Yeah, so I remember you saying that, one of the things that you're big on is work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I kind of wanted to know, what are some of the things that you really try to prioritize or you don't compromise on that really help you keep that balance?
Yeah. So I learned, first of all, I am no saint, and I'll tell you guys how I learned my lesson. I was on my honeymoon in Germany, and I was checking email from Uber because they were my client, and I shouldn't have been. And when I realized, what am I doing? I'm on a trip of a lifetime. I should not be worrying about the stupid contract that is going to be fine if I'm not there. Like, everything will be fine. I had a really amazing boss at Politico who, she's the one, I said it earlier, I think, she's the one who said, we're not curing cancer, everything will be fine. And that really put it into perspective to me, because I was answering emails at 11 o'clock. I was going into the office at 7. I was going weeks without seeing friends. I was going 9 months without going back to Huntington to see my family. And that just wasn't a way to live. It's who you surround yourself with professionally. I loved my time at the Washington Post. I was very sad to leave. But I left because my boss at the Washington Post, I pure chance lucked out. This fantastic boss named Tiffany Johnson. I adore her. And she left for USA Today. So even though I loved my job at the Washington Post, I thought, I'm going to have a better work-life balance with this fantastic boss. Who I'd seen her in practice have her own work-life balance. And so I followed her to USA Today, and she's my current boss there. So I'm going to be honest, there's not a ton of companies who do prioritize work-life balance. And some people, that career path works for them. But for me, I just knew that I wanted to have kids someday. I wanted to get married. And also my current family, I really valued. And so I followed a career path that I knew would help me with that. And I now don't compromise on off time. When I'm on vacation, I'm not checking my email anymore. Because I used to, even before my honeymoon, I'd be with friends in Ireland, and it'd be like 3 a.m. in Ireland, and I'd be checking my email, connecting to Wi-Fi. But the day I went on maternity leave, I deleted my email app. So it's been amazing. So you'll have to carefully select who you surround yourself with professionally to make that happen.
Cool. Thank you.
If I can just interject, it's kind of interesting having not always been in academia. One thing I notice is that employers will take advantage of young people because they think that you don't have any lives. And you'll find that as you get older and you have kids and you're married, you start drawing those lines in the sand more. But when you're young, very often they're like, I got this kid. They can stay here in the office till late. So be very careful that as a young employee that you're not taken advantage of, and yet you still show yourself to be eager to get the job done.
Yeah, that's such a great
look at you and think, oh, young meat, we're gonna work them.
Well, and I will say, if you guys haven't read it, male or female, I think you should. Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, I read early on in my career, and I found a lot of really great points from it. I know Facebook, it has its issues and everything, but there are some good learning points. And in it mentioned, kind of to Monica's point, when Sheryl was young, she would work long hours because she didn't have kids. But she started drawing a line because, first of all, what if she never wanted to have kids, which is her right? Does that mean she has to work those long hours? Her personal life is just as important, even if kids aren't present. So also think about that too, just because you're young, do not be taken advantage of. And if you establish boundaries early on, they're going to remember that. Like, there was a woman I worked with at the Washington Post who was like 35 maybe, and she had been there since college, and she had always been kind of a pushover. And so she was 35, still the one getting coffee for people, still planning the birthday parties. And I was like, you're a manager. You should be doing far more important things. But she had never established those boundaries to begin with. So it was a part of kind of her personality set that they knew she would just do it. So definitely stand up for yourself, no matter your level in the company. And then I think, Haley, did we get to your question?
I don't think so, not for this one. Sorry, I have another one. I know that a lot of us are in either our last semester or our second to last semester going out. Do you have advice for like interviews or how to approach the job hunt that you found valuable?
Yeah, it's exhausting. You're gonna cry. It's terrifying. You think you're never gonna get hired. You're gonna get hired. My biggest thing is your first job may not be your dream job. Like I said, I worked at an insurance company in Baltimore for 6 months, and that's just because I wanted to pay rent and live with my best friend in Baltimore because it sounded like fun. But so it may not happen, but it's gonna. I'm a firm believer in fate and things working out, and you know, I learned things in Baltimore that I wouldn't have learned anywhere else. So just because the first job isn't your dream job, or the first offer isn't your dream offer, or you take the job you thought was your dream job and you're in it and you think, oh my God, this isn't for me. That's okay. You can change jobs, take the experience. And you know, I think, are you guys considered Gen Z? Are you millennials? I don't know what you are.
I'm older, so I'm technically a millennial, but I'm like right on the edge.
Okay. Well, I know like with my parents, you know, here I am, I'm 31 and I've had, I mean, technically 5 jobs since graduation. And my parents both had the same job their entire life, retired at the first job they ever had. And I got a lot of crap like, why are you job jumping? You know, people are going to think you're like a steady employee, da, da, da. It's not the nature anymore of business and the workforce. So don't be scared of that. You know, you can try and you can leave. So definitely remember that as you guys are applying and considering offers and your first job too. It's definitely a trial and error situation.
Well, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. And then Serafina, you had another question?
Yeah, I was just curious if you could tell us about one client who you like loved working with, and then if you can tell us a client that you really hated working with.
Ooh, I don't know. Let's see. It's not
client X. I hated people.
Yeah. Well, it's not even about brand. It's about the person you work with. So for instance, when I was at Politico, I was working for, I was doing an advertising campaign for one of the big banks, you know, like based in New York, global recognition, da, da, da. And it was like a $2 million opportunity. And it was the biggest advertising campaign I had worked on at that point. And I was terrified of messing up $2 million. And the woman who was my age, who worked for the advertising firm representing the bank was awful. I mean, she would call my personal cell phone at 2 a.m, yelling at me, saying stuff wasn't loading right on the website, all this stuff. And it goes back to that humanity thing. I think that people remember that. And I think there are people now who I've worked with who are only, you know, running a $5,000 campaign, which is chump change. Unfortunately, $5,000 is a lot to me, but for a large publisher, $5,000 isn't a lot. But because they're kind to me, they're understanding, they're flexible, they're collaborative. If they called me at 2 a.m. and they were panicked about something going wrong, I would grab my laptop and help them out. So that definitely happened with that bank, but it wasn't because of the brand itself. It was, like I said, it's the person you remember, and they were just, I remember her name. I remember what she was wearing the first time I met her. Like, she was just the worst. And then brands I've loved working for. I love brands that selfishly align with my personal beliefs or passions, but that doesn't even just mean politically. For instance, I grew up, my dad was a huge Cincinnati Reds fan, and I got to work on an ad campaign with Cincinnati Reds. So stuff like that's always exciting. You kind of geek out a little bit. You feel a little bit like Jenna Rink of 13 going on 30, like, oh my God, I get to work with a personal hobby or interest of mine. So that stuff's always been really fun. Yeah. And then Amanda's got a question. We haven't heard from Amanda yet.
Hi. I'm having problems with my camera, but I'm gonna see if it'll work now. Hold on. Okay. I think there we go. Okay. Hi.
Hi.
So we kind of touched on this already, talking about getting taken advantage of as a young person looking for a job for the first time. And so looking back now, knowing what you know, if you were a recent college graduate, what would be some red flags you would look for, or you would say, if you were looking for a job? Like if a job was like, we need you to do this, what would be a couple of red flags? And then also what would be a couple of green lights for you?
Yeah, well, that's a hard one. I think there's some other things to consider as well. You know, when I went to Politico, I knew I was going to, at the time, it was considered a startup. I knew that the hours were unique because it was a startup. So I think you need to also consider, you know, what are you willing to invest? At that time, you know, I was 22. I was living on my own. I just wanted, you know, desperately to get my feet wet. And so I was okay with the long hours at that point. And I think once I left Politico, I was there for 4 years. Once I left, I kind of earned my stripes to have the flexibility where if I wanted to leave at 3 p.m., I left at 3 p.m. because they know I had like laid that groundwork for years in advance. But it's what you want to do, what your work-life balance wants are. Definitely ask in the interview process if, you know, a friend of yours is referring you or works there or has a friend of a friend. I love LinkedIn personally. You know, look if you have a friend of a friend on LinkedIn who works at the company, and get that inside scoop. Glassdoor is also great. People do reviews on Glassdoor where they'll say, you know what, the hours aren't great. There's no room for upward mobility. They don't do promotions or raises really. Look for that stuff. Green lights, I think, again, LinkedIn. I stalk people on LinkedIn when I'm applying for jobs. See how long people have worked there. If you like look up, I think you can search by people who worked at Washington Post. If you search, it'll show everybody within your network. It's like, you know, 2 connections away or what have you, that works there. You can look and be like, did everyone just work there for a year? Did they only work there for 2 years? Look for someone who's been there for 5. If you're starting to see a pattern of kind of a burnout rate of 2 years, that might be a red flag. If you are seeing what I call lifers, 5, 10, 15-year people or upward, that's a great sign. The Washington Post and USA Today both have that, where I work with people who have been there for 17 years. And I think that's a fantastic sign that you can grow and stay with a company like that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit, you also had that entrepreneurial venture, Alex. Lemon something, what was it?
Yeah, Sweet Lemon Magazine.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So that was a creative outlet. That was such a great spot in my early career. Sweet Lemon Magazine. Sweet Lemon Magazine was a digital magazine I started with what I like to call my internet friends. I was very active on Twitter and followed a bunch of bloggers. And I liked this one blogger, and she said she wanted to start a digital magazine and was looking for writers. So I was in the business world at this point. I was doing some freelance writing. I missed writing consistently because of my journalism background. So I applied and ended up partnering with her she was kind of running the business side of things. I ended up applying as a writer, but getting like an editor position. And so for four of us women ran the digital magazine for 4 years. It was super cool. We never met in person. It was all remote. We did it all through Google Hangouts, Google Docs, all that stuff. And it was kind of my first foray into project management, working with graphic designers. I was editing 35 freelance writers remotely. And it was really cool. And actually one of my best friends now, she was one of the 4 that started it with me. Her name's Ali Vitale. She's an NBC reporter now. You may see her sometimes, and you should retweet her stuff. She's doing great campaign trail coverage right now. But it's just really cool how those connections also have helped me in my career. So yeah, internet friends are great. It's another great way to network. If you aren't a very outgoing person, if you are like, I can't go to a networking event, I say make those bonds and those little sub communities of the internet. You know, if you're really into feminism or cybersecurity. Like there's those message boards, there's those Facebook subgroups, like those things exist. Like find your people online and connect with them and they can help you as well. Just because they're not in person or in your city or town doesn't mean they can't help you grow in your career. And Speed Limit no longer exists, so don't try Googling it.
I'm wondering how did it, you guys did it just kind of run its course?
It ran its course. People started, the NBC reporter I mentioned, Allie and I, we were the last two that kind of hung on for dear life. People started quitting because, you know, it wasn't becoming profitable, unfortunately. I mean, it was profitable, but not to the point where we could be like full-time salary employees. And we were putting in work of full-time salary employees. So it just ran its course. People started elevating themselves in their own personal careers. And so we had a bit to do, but it was awesome. I got to interview, oh my God, I can't even remember his name, but he is the brother of Scooter Braun, and he does a nonprofit. So Scooter Braun is the manager of like Justin Bieber and all those people. His brother runs a nonprofit called Pencils for Promise. So we got to interview him, which was really fantastic. My millennial self was super excited. I got to interview Lauren Conrad because she actually wrote me a thank you note and I still have it framed. She has a company called The Little Market, which is a fair trade home decor brand that helps elevate women in third world countries to, you know, give themselves salaries and safe homes and access to medicine. So things like that. It was really, really cool. So internet friends can take you on some really cool, weird adventures. Yeah.
So does anybody else have a last question for Alex?
I can also tell you just like favorite foods, where to eat.
Color?
Yeah, I can do all that.
Do all cool people wear tie-dye? I don't know.
Yes. In quarantine, they do.
Yeah. So I guess that's going to wrap it up today, unless anybody else has something want to scoot in.
Yeah.
Well, everybody join me in thanking Alex for taking the time out of her very busy day. And
it was nice talking to adults. Thank you, guys. I miss adults.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. You can sign off now.
Bye, guys.
Bye.